by Congressman of the 3rd Congressional District in the state of Minnesota, our congressman, and close friend, Erik Paulsen. Erik, how are you?
Hey, Dan, Andy, good to be with you. Can you hear me good?
Absolutely, we can.
Erik, I was talking with Andy just earlier this afternoon about the trip you and I took to Israel a few years ago. That was a fun one, wasn't it?
Oh, it was a great trip and a very educational trip, and I wish more members of Congress and elected officials would take those opportunities to visit Israel, one of our best allies, obviously, in the world, and a beacon of hope in the Middle East in particular.
Erik, you've been to Israel more than once.
Yeah, I think I've actually been there a total of 3 times, and it's been a few years now, but the experiences always are fresh and new. And, look, I mean, as you guys know, I mean, they're in the news every day. They're under threat very often because of their hostile neighbors. And, of course, the Iran deal, which is back in the news with the presidential debate and all the elections going on right now, I think is going to continue to force Congress and make sure that we monitor that very closely, because I think we have real concerns about the direction that went.
Erik, in the midst of all of the tumult in the presidential election that's sucking all of the news time on politics, you've actually had some real accomplishments in the House of Representatives just recently. You had your new stock ownership bill that helps startups. It passed the House just 2 weeks ago. Tell us, what's that bill all about?
Yeah, I'm really excited about that, and I think because we passed in the House with a bipartisan vote, I think we're actually going to get some movement on that in the Senate. And as a lot of folks may know, startup companies, I mean, that's where the entrepreneurs come up with these great ideas. And it's not just California tech companies, but it's companies that people want to work at where they can have the next big idea. They may not get compensated with a big salary, but they do get the opportunity for some stock, some equity in the company when they go big. But the trends have been lately that a lot of these private equity or the private companies, they stay private. And stock options that are granted to employees, unfortunately, the IRS comes after them for a big tax bill when they have to exercise their stock options under a certain period of time. And so what my bill does is essentially says, look, if there's no market to sell your stock on to help you pay the tax, it's not fair for these employees to lose all of their equity opportunity. And so it gives a 7-year deferral to pay the tax. That won't go to the highest, paid officials at the company or the CEO, but it will go to the lower level employees. And also the other requirement is that 80% of the employees would have to own the company, have to have shares in the company. So it encourages employee ownership. And of course, when you have employee ownership, employees work a lot harder for that big idea or for that company that they're working for.
Yeah, Erik, a sound understanding of how companies work is so critical, and you have always been at the cutting edge of that based on your background and experience in Congress. And this bill is just another example of that. Kudos for pressing this one forward.
Yeah, well, and it is a focus on small business. I do believe it's a common sense fix to the tax code that it's going to help us keep America on the forefront of innovation and entrepreneurship.
Erik, speaking of being in the forefront, you've been in the forefront of the House of Representatives and of the whole U.S. Congress fighting human trafficking. Tell me, how have you felt the reception has been in the House? How have you been able to make progress on that issue?
Yeah, we saw earlier this week here in the Twin Cities a big bust that was done by undercover operations of a big human trafficking, sex trafficking operation right here in the Twin Cities. And so, the good news is that we've actually passed some new laws with stronger teeth that goes after the bad guys. But most importantly, I would say protects these young 12, 13, and 14-year-old girls primarily that get trapped in these awful situations. And by giving them safe harbor, we treat them as victims. We give them services. We get them back on their feet. They come out of the shadows. And when they do that, they're more inclined to actually help turn in the bad guys. I know also at the State Fair just a month ago, we had a press conference with a lot of state and local leaders and launched a new anti-trafficking awareness campaign with billboards with the national hotline number that we publicized on those billboards. They're up right now across the state. Not only for, you or I or may see something and want to say something, but also for some of these victims that may be at a bus stop or somewhere where they think that, there is somewhere I can reach out for some help. And so I think we're going to continue to be able to save lives in this area, and it's probably one of the areas it's been most gratifying for me, in Congress or gridlock in Washington. Yeah, this is actually very meaningful because it literally is saving lives, and it feels good to make a difference.
Erik, in the midst of all of the partisan tumult and in the midst of the increasingly bitter partisan divide that we see in Washington, you are a member of Congress that's been able to accomplish things, that's been able to reach across, actually get legislation passed that really helps Americans. What's the secret to being able to get things done in such a bitterly partisan divide, in an environment of such a bitterly partisan divide?
Well, it's probably not too much of a secret, but a big part of it is, building relationships with some of your colleagues and seeking out some of that common ground. And, I know when I helped repeal, and suspend the medical device tax, which is really hitting Minnesota hard, part of Obamacare, right? I eventually, after 5 years, we had votes in the House and we could pass it, but the president wasn't going to sign it and the Senate didn't want to take a vote. But for 5 years of persistence, we got enough votes in the House to override a presidential veto because we had enough Democrats that this is just a really bad policy to tax your sales and not your profit on this great American industry. And so by building some of those relationships and just kind of sitting down with them, they signed on the bill. It kind of moved it forward. It forced the president's hand. It forced the Senate into action, and we got it done. So part of that, I think, is just spending some time with your colleagues. It can even just be in a simple social setting. That doesn't mean you have to give up on your principles because I think we have some very different. I have some very different differences with the president and certainly some of my Democratic colleagues. But there is opportunity to work and get things done.
Talking about those differences, Erik. You mentioned Obamacare. Let's talk about that for a minute. The numbers are coming out now regarding massive increases in costs to businesses, particularly small businesses, to everyone out there in terms of their health care costs. What is it going to mean if we get Hillary Clinton in the White House as it relates to Obamacare?
Well, the worry is that, the latest news about MNsure and Obamacare, it's troubling for hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans. The rates are going up upwards of 60-some% this year. A lot of Minnesotans are struggling to pay those health care bills, and that's going to be devastating. And it's not just the premium increases. It's the fact that actually deductibles have doubled or gone up to such a level that people feel like they don't even have insurance. Not to mention you have fewer choices for doctors and plans. So, as a Republican, it's not just voting no on Obamacare 50 times. It's about offering a better alternative. And regardless of who has the White House, I think we got to make sure that the families and individuals and small businesses that are facing these dramatic higher health care costs are going to go back to having a patient-centered approach with some common sense reforms. And that includes making sure that health insurance is portable from job to job, from your early years into your you shouldn't be locked into it just because you're at a certain employer. Have sales across state lines, get more competition, pay for quality, not for quantity for our healthcare providers. That's going to, I think a big part of that is also having transparency so you know what you're paying for as a consumer. And I'm working on some healthcare savings account initiatives so families can shop around for the best care at the lowest price and make those costs transparent so consumers understand what health treatments really cost.
You're listening to the Parker Rosen Hour. We are here with Congressman Erik Paulsen, can-do congressman, not one who simply votes no, but has ideas, pushes them forward, works across the aisle, gets things done. And we were just talking about Obamacare. Erik, what's the latest coming out of the state in terms of MNsure?
Well, I think with the announcement that 100,000 individuals under the Blue Cross plan, they were essentially, Blue Cross said we're not going to offer these services anymore,
including me, Erik.
Yeah. Well, see, I've had many stories from people who have called sharing their stories, and I think also the fact that some of the other providers that are still here that will be, trying to make up the difference, they're also going to limit their exposure. So it's going to be a race to get covered by another company. And those that are just left over, they're going to have to go with the government exchange, at MNsure. And I think, we've seen the problems that that's had. And in a lot of states around the country, there's even only one provider available now. So you've got no competition. And a lot of these nonprofit co-ops have failed. And folks, through no fault of their own, now will be penalized by the IRS. We're trying to rectify that and pass legislation to make sure it doesn't happen because that's very unfair. But those are the problems that are going on right now.
And the touted reason for doing this, which was to provide coverage to the millions who had no coverage, and the numbers that they were talking about by now having coverage, those haven't been met either. I think it's only about a third of what they were saying would have coverage by this point currently do. So there's failure in every area of Obamacare.
Well, and I think a big part of it is, too, I think a lot of the architects of Obamacare knew there would be failure, and they created this as sort of the alternative to going to a single-payer plan, which I am not a supporter of at all. We need to get back to a market-driven approach and address healthcare costs in that manner. But some of those architects would say that's the direction. Nancy Pelosi, she said, well, just pass the bill. We'll find out what's in it later. And she's going to be here in Minnesota, actually, tomorrow. So it might be a good time to actually resurrect some of these discussions and see what her response is now.
Well, Erik, we like you because you're not only the math guy, you're the anti-sex trafficking guy, you are the pro-employee ownership guy, you are the get things done in Congress guy. You're
pro-national security guy.
The pro-national security guy, the against the Iran deal guy, the pro-Israel guy. You punch every ticket as far as the Parker Rosen Hour is concerned, and we want to thank you very much for joining us here. And good luck on your race. Work hard, fight hard, and get reelected. And
that sounds good.